I think it's been around 2 weeks since I sold my RTX 4090 at a loss for my RX 7900 XTX that's in my system now, but why did I do it and do I regret it? Let's talk about it. Before that, this video is brought to you by VIPCDKdeals.com. CDK Deals is a website dedicated to getting you the best prices on games and software, and right now you can get a Windows 10 Pro OEM key for an insanely low price. Just find the best price and apply my special discount code GPC20 for an additional 30% off. You can also check out securely with PayPal, and once the payment is cleared, you should get access to the code both in your account as well as in your email. In order to activate the new copy of Windows 10, just search Activate under Windows and type in your key. So if you want to learn more, be sure to click the link in the description below. I have had the RX 7900 XTX for a while now, and I want to give you guys an update on whether or not I regret losing money swapping from my RTX 4090 and moving to the RX 7900 XTX, because even though this RX 7900 XTX was able to get around a massive 30% improvement in terms of its frequency, and I did find it to be, in terms of my 1% lows, very close to an RTX 4090 in the majority of games, at least when ray tracing is off. Yes, the RTX 4090 is still a little bit faster, and yes, I did lose money swapping to this card, so do I regret doing that? Why would you lose money moving to what is technically a slower card? That doesn't make any sense. Well, let me explain a bunch of the benefits that I've had moving from my RTX 4090 to the 7900 XTX. So I'm going to go ahead and read off some stuff so I get this exactly right. Now, the first thing that I noticed moving to the RX 7900 XTX is that my games actually had a little bit more stability, I guess you could say. Yeah, the average frame rate was lower than the RTX 4090, but the minimum performance was about the same, again, depending on the game. And of course, we're talking about an overclocked to the max XTX versus a stock 4090. So of course, if you have a 4090 that overclocks really well, mine didn't, but if yours does, yeah, it could definitely be faster in those 1% lows as well. I'm not going to say that it couldn't be. That would be something that would need more testing. There's just less frame drops, it seemed like, at least to me. Now, the other thing that I saw that was actually a huge improvement is that my audio latency problems completely went away after I moved to AMD. Now, it is well known and it has been documented for a long time that NVIDIA has been having some issues when it comes to some latency, I believe, with their drivers. Now, if you want to have the exact details, I do suggest you look it up, and it sounds like NVIDIA is working on fixing this, so it's very possible that in the near future, these issues with NVIDIA could definitely completely go away. I wouldn't be surprised if that does end up being the case, but at the time of using the RTX 4090, I used it for a very long time, and I had a lot of issues in Windows. Now, specifically, one example that I could give you in terms of the latency issues I was having is, well, if I clicked on a new audio source, just for example, let's say that I went into the Windows software to check to see if my speakers or my headphones were active. If I click the audio, it actually might not play audio at all the first time, or it might crackle or be significantly delayed. And this happened in a lot of programs. Well, after I swapped to AMD, you press the, check your audio button, and it just immediately plays audio with no crackle. And this was the case for basically every single program that I had. And this is something that I didn't even expect to be fixed, but it was. So there's another quality of life issue just completely solved by moving to AMD. Now, could it be broken in the future? Who knows? But as of right now, it's fixed, and I'm really glad that it's fixed. Now, another thing that I found is that on NVIDIA, there was a couple of really weird things like this. I'll just give you one example. Fortnite HDR just wouldn't work with Auto HDR. Now, Fortnite technically doesn't support HDR, but if you had Auto HDR on, it would, at least sometimes on NVIDIA, launch and apply that HDR, and so it would look a lot better, but a lot of times, and more frequently as of late, I was noticing it just wasn't working. Well, when I swapped to AMD, it just launches with Auto HDR every single time. Now, will this work for everybody? I don't know, but it works for me now. So there's a lot of little things like that where all of a sudden, yeah, Auto HDR is working in the game now. Another thing that I want to mention is that, well, any displays that use FreeSync typically don't have issues with NVIDIA, but I have run across a few instances where it kind of does. There might be some TVs or monitors where maybe you can't reach the maximum refresh rate with an overclock, or maybe there's some other weird like flickering or other issues that you run into with NVIDIA that I'm just not seeing on AMD anymore. So another quality of life issue just completely solved. All these FreeSync displays, and FreeSync is the standard, just typically work pretty great on AMD, and that's not always the case with NVIDIA. Now, another thing that I noticed is that I'm just not really getting any more screen flickering or blackouts on my second display. A big issue that I was seeing, and I've seen a lot of other people reporting this recently online, but of course we don't have enough data to prove that it really is a mass issue. It could be highly dependent on your hardware and stuff like that. I don't want to put anything out there that could be incorrect, but at least for me, and I've seen a lot of other people talking about this as well, it seemed like after the RTX 30 series, when I moved to that, in the 40 series included in that as well, if I had my second display here, like this one hooked up and both the screens were on, sometimes the second display would just blank out. It just, for no reason, or flicker or something. Like, it just was really bizarre. I was having a lot of weird issues with multi-monitor setups, which of course is a problem because I'm always going to be using two monitors. I find it to be very useful when it comes to editing videos to have that second monitor to have all my files up on and all that sort of stuff. And yes, I did try, multiple different graphics cards from the RTX 30 and 40 series. They all had the same issue, for me at least. Again, your mileage may vary, and I did also try stuff like DDU, reinstalling Windows, all that sort of stuff, and it just didn't fix it. So my theory is, maybe depending on your hardware or the type of displays you have plugged in, NVIDIA might have some compatibility or driver issues with multi-monitor setups right now, which is kind of hilarious because that's typically been an AMD issue. Well, swapped to AMD, haven't had any issues now. So there's another quality of life thing completely resolved. So as you've noticed so far, when it comes to just gaming, it seems like NVIDIA doesn't really have a whole lot of issues, and yeah, the 4090 is the fastest, but when it comes to a bunch of quality of life stuff and just using Windows in your day-to-day life, it seems like I was just having, and I've seen some other people reporting other stuff as well, a lot of issues with NVIDIA's current drivers. And I do believe a lot of this stuff could be completely fixed in the future, but as of right now, it isn't, and for years at this point, they haven't been fixing it. And this is a big reason as to why I swapped over to AMD. I just can't handle dealing with all these quality of life issues in my day-to-day life when I use Windows a lot. I don't only game. In fact, I do a lot more work on my computer than I game these days, which means I need it to work and work really well. And if AMD is working better for me, then that's what I'm going to use. And then the final issue that I saw with NVIDIA that was really strange, and this might just be specific to my Samsung TV or something like that, as I've seen a lot of reports from my friends and other people as well that they're not having any issues with this, but I was seeing this issue all the time, and that was alt-tabbing. When I would try and alt-tab out of a full-screen game, it would take a long time to get to the desktop. I mean, it was anywhere between like 2 to 8 seconds at times, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but it was a long time. It should not be taking that much time to get to your desktop, and that is incredibly annoying, especially if somebody like sends me a message and I don't have my second monitor on. I gotta alt-tab, and if it takes me like 5+ seconds to get to the desktop, that is incredibly irritating and something I just don't want to deal with. Well, ever since I swapped to the RX 7900 XTX, I alt-tab instantly out of every game all the time. It doesn't matter if I'm in full screen, windowed full screen, it just always instantly alt-tabs, and it is so good. Let me tell you guys, being able to actually alt-tab quickly again is crazy. It's like, so I was doing a test and I was using the RTX 4090, I was like, okay, alt-tab 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now we're on the desktop. Then I moved to AMD and it was like, okay, it's done. It was that fast. So I don't know what was going on there. Again, I've tried DDU, I've tried new Windows installs, I've tried new RTX 40 series cards, I've tried new 30 series cards. I had this issue on all of them, and I don't know what the problem is, but that was an issue I was seeing, and I can only report to you guys what I'm seeing. So if you're not having that issue, that's great. And there's a ton of other stuff with displays, like I mentioned earlier, like hooking up displays to my 40 series card and having it just completely freeze up the system, a weird artifacting, not being able to reach maximum refresh rates on certain FreeSync monitors. The list goes on and on and on. Not being able to plug in multiple 4K high refresh rate displays that don't use DSC without having to like unplug my main monitor. There's just so many things with displays that I was having trouble with NVIDIA that ultimately led me to moving to the RX 7900 XTX. So yeah, do I regret moving to AMD? Absolutely not. Sure, I gave up a little bit of performance when you compare a super overclocked XTX versus an RTX 4090 stock. And again, 4090 can overclock as well, although in my experience, they typically overclock very, very poorly. Even if you have a really good bin and it seems like it's overclocking really well at first, the more you use it, it seems like you have to keep dropping and dropping and dropping and dropping the clocks until eventually your overclock is really bad. That's been my experience with a ton of 40 series cards. But hey, maybe you have a golden sample and yours overclocks really well. I'm really glad that that's the case for you, and I'm glad that you have the fastest graphics card on the planet. And hey, I'm not telling you that you should swap. I'm absolutely not saying that. If you're not having any issues, don't swap. Don't do that. Just keep what you have. That's great. But for me, I really felt like I needed to swap. I'm really glad I swapped. I do not regret it. In fact, the only thing that I do regret is sticking with the RTX 4090 for so long and putting up with all these issues for so long when I could have just swapped over probably a long time ago and none of these issues would have been present. Now, on launch, I had some issues with the XTX, so I'm glad I waited a little bit, but yeah, so far my experience has been really great. I'll update you guys again in the future, but if you're sitting there and you're on the fence between NVIDIA and AMD, you know what? If the XTX is way cheaper than an RTX 4080, which is technically what it's supposed to be competing with, not a 4090, yeah, if that one's way cheaper and you're not super into ray tracing, honestly, my experience has been great, and I do recommend taking a look at it or maybe giving it a try and see if it'll work for you, because it really worked well for me. And again, the only thing I regret is not switching sooner. But hey, that's just what I think. Do you think the RTX 4090 is a way better graphics card, or do you think AMD has the better options? Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments below. And if you do want to get direct access to not only talking to me in my Discord, but also some behind the scenes content, I do highly suggest taking a look at my Patreon link in the description below to get access to that. But either way, I appreciate you guys for watching the video regardless. And of course, I'll see you in the next video. If you made it to the end of the video, be sure to drop a like. Every time you do so, AMD and NVIDIA release new GPUs. Also, if you want to see more, check out one of these related videos. You won't be disappointed.